Peshawar, known as Peshawar by its inhabitants, it is one of the oldest cities in the region and has been a part of many different Indo-Iranian empires throughout the ages. Owing to its ancient age, it has been known by a variety of names, such as Purshapura, meaning city of men in ancient Sanskrit, Via Kirita in Avestan, and later Gandhara. The current name was most probably given by the Mughal Emperor Akbar, which meant place on the frontier. Before we begin, I want to thank all of my patrons that continue to financially support the channel. I appreciate your help. Lying between the western banks of the Bara River and the east end of the Khaybar Pass, the city now known as Peshawar was part of a province of the Persian Achaemenid Empire from the 6th until the 4th century BC. Eventually, it fell to the momentum of the Hellenic expansion under Alexander the Great, who passed through the city on his way towards India in 327 BC. After Alexander died, his empire was divided between his generals, and Peshawar fell into the hands of Seleucus I. But he himself was forced to give up the entire Indus River region to the uprising Chandragupta Maurya of the Mauryan Empire in exchange for 500 war elephants which Seleucus used in his Middle Eastern campaigns. Chandragupta's grandson Ashoka instituted Buddhism as the official religion of his realm, and the Peshawar region became a hotbed of Buddhist culture. This is where Peshawar's history gets real funky, because it went through a period when it was successively ruled by empires with a hybrid of cultural backgrounds. For instance, Greco-Bactrian, Indo-Greek, and Indo-Parthian kingdoms. This naturally allowed Peshawar to form quite an eclectic identity. Perhaps the heyday of Peshawar's history was in the 1st century AD, when it was the capital of the Kushan Empire. During this period, it became a trading center between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. According to Chandler, no, not that Chandler, the 20th century historian Tertius Chandler, he claimed that the city increased to a population of 120,000, making it the 7th most populated city in the ancient world around the year 100 AD. This was thanks to the Kushans, the most famous of which was the 3rd Kushan king, Kanishka, who was also a great advocate of Buddhism and is associated with the Kanishka Stupa, which may have been the tallest building in the world at that time. A stupa is a mound-like building that contains relics and is important to Buddhists. The Kanishka Stupa was so large that the 5th century Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Faxian said it was 120 meters tall, and it could even be seen traveling down from the mountains of Afghanistan to the Gandharan plains. Unfortunately, all that survived from this awesome building is the mound because it was struck by lightning at least 3 times. How weird is that? When the White Huns, who were nomadic Turks from Central Asia, came over in the 5th century AD, Peshawar had already been taken over by the Persian Sassanids. The Huns, being a nation of fire worshippers, caused great harm to the Buddhist population of the city and destroyed many of its Buddhist monuments. However, it would still remain the religion of the elites until it was supplanted by Hinduism under the Hindu Shahi, which continued and survived until the 11th century. Islam's introduction to Peshawar most likely grew under the auspices of the Pashtun people, who arrived in the valley during the 1st millennium BC from the Sulayman Mountains in Afghanistan and brought their culture with them. Some Pashtun tribes converted to Islam in the initial annexation of Khorasan during the Rashidun Khalifate. But the first Muslim ruler of Peshawar was Mahmud Ghaznavi, or Mahmud of Ghazni, who conquered the region in 1001. From then on, Peshawar continued to be in the hands of Afghan-based dynasties until the 16th century, when it officially became a part of the Mughal Empire after Babar had brought the area under his influence on his way to conquer India. You can find out more about this in the video I did on the Battle of Panipat. A significant yet very underemphasized aspect of the city's history was the brief period under the Suri dynasty during the mid-16th century. Under this Pashtun dynasty, Peshawar boomed economically. This was because of the extension of the Great Trunk Road, which ran from Kabul in the north to Delhi and onwards towards the Bengal in the east. When the Mughals regained the city, they turned it into a city of art by replicating the gardens in the same fashion as those in Persia. Let's not forget that one of the city's most outstanding buildings today is the Muhabbat Khan Masjid, built during the reign of Shah Jahan by the Mughal governor of the region. But eventually, the instability created by the waning power of the Mughals meant that new powers would vie for control of this important city. This manifested itself in the rivalry between the Afghan and the Sikh empires. Peshawar had been the winter capital of the Afghan Empire, and the majority of the city's population would have been Pashtun, which was the ethnicity of the Afghan royal family. But it was taken by Ranjit Singh's Sikh forces in 1818. The Sikh chapter of Peshawar is considered to be a particularly dark one, thanks in no small part to Paulo Avitabile, who as chief oversaw much of the city's bazaars, mosques, and gardens being damaged. The city declined completely. However, it wasn't long before the Sikh Empire itself was involved in a war with the British East India Company, and Peshawar came under British rule in 1849. The year 1893 was the last official change in the history of Peshawar before it became a part of Pakistan in 1947. Sir Mortimer Durand, the Foreign Secretary of British India, and the Emir of Afghanistan, Abdurrahman Khan, came to an agreement which created something known as the Durand Line, dividing the boundaries of Afghanistan and British India, which was subsequently inherited by Pakistan after its creation. The British colonial portion of its history was a welcome respite from the dark days of Sikh rule. Peshawar was made the British headquarters on the frontier with Afghanistan, so the city was given a great deal of attention by its colonial overseers. This attention mainly came in the form of construction works. For starters, Peshawar was linked by rail to the rest of British India. The British also built the Cunningham Clock Tower and the Victoria Hall, which is now the home of the Peshawar Museum with its epic collection of ancient artifacts. Not to mention perhaps the two most important educational institutions in the city today, the Edwards College and the Islamia College. In the first half of the 20th century, Peshawar was a key political headquarter for one of the most important Indian independence leaders. Abdul Ghaffar Khan, an ethnic Pashtun who was also known as Bacha Khan, was a close colleague and friend to Mahatma Gandhi. And in the spirit of Gandhi, Bacha Khan formed the Khuday Khidmatgars, a movement that called for the independence of India from the British with non-violent activism. In more recent times, Peshawar has had a turbulent history, owing largely to the influx of Afghan refugees in the aftermath of the communist and Soviet takeover in Afghanistan at the end of the 1970s. The city has been the scene of rising violence in the post-9/11 period, with the militant group the Taliban asserting its presence in the city with deadly terrorist attacks. And now Hikmah Musings, the part where I try to take a lesson away from the subject of the video. The case of Peshawar is important in shedding light onto the legacy of European colonialism in the Islamic world. The Pashtuns, who make up the dominant ethnic group in Afghanistan, were split in half by the Durand Line in 1893. This was a means to secure British India's frontier. When British India ceased to exist, Afghanistan voiced its irredentist claim for Peshawar and the surrounding areas on the basis of its shared cultural, ethnic, and historical experience. Afghanistan even supported the notion of an independent state for the Pashtun-dominated areas of British India, but their aspirations have repeatedly been denied. Not to mention, the aspirations of key regional activists like Bacha Khan were completely disregarded during the partition of India and in the subsequent period after it. This has been a massive bone of contention between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This goes to show that countries in the Muslim world still have to face the consequences of actions carried out by its former colonizers. A good example of this is when in 2014, ISIS burst onto the scene, and after conquering Syrian and Iraqi territory, they proclaimed they were getting rid of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This was the agreement made by the British and French during World War I to carve up the Middle East between them, and they consequently drew borders in the region according to their zones of influence, without taking into consideration the traditional demography of the land. Who lived where? Who got along with who? Who didn't? In fact, in the last 100 years, many regions in the Islamic world still suffer from this post-colonialist conundrum. This video is a part of Project Homecoming, a collaborative project amongst history YouTubers which seeks to detail the history of their home cities or countries. You can find a link to the entire playlist in the bio to this video. Since I had lived as a kid in Peshawar for a number of years, I thought to myself I might as well do it on the city's history. I still have incredibly fond memories of the time that I spent in Peshawar, with its beautiful natural landscape that has luscious green valleys and imposing mountains. I can't forget about the amazing food that the city has to offer. If you guys have never tried a Peshawari chapli kebab, you're definitely missing out. If you approve, like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.